Let me tell you something strange about people who have no friends. We live in a world where connection is treated like proof of worth, where being liked is mistaken for being alive. Yet some people move through life without close companions, without a circle, without names lighting up their phone. And here's the question that always lingers quietly beneath the surface. What does it really mean to be alone in a world that never stops talking? It's easy to explain it away. People say they're antisocial, awkward, difficult, too intense, or not trying hard enough. But that's not the full picture. Beneath the surface, there's an entire psychology at play, one that isn't about rejection alone, but about awareness, about adaptation, about how a person learns to exist when belonging never feels simple. See, for some people, having no friends isn't a failure of character. It's not a lack of warmth. It's not an inability to connect. It's often the result of connecting too deeply, too early, or too honestly in a world that prefers things light and manageable. And this isn't a judgment. It's an invitation to understand. You might notice them in everyday life. They move quietly through social spaces. They listen more than they speak. They don't collect people, but they observe them. They show up to work, to obligations, to conversations, but rarely linger afterward. They don't gossip much. They don't overshare. They don't rush to be known. From the outside, they seem reserved, private, sometimes distant, but inside, something else is happening. They're often aware of subtle shifts others miss, the tone change in a voice, the pause before a sentence, the energy in a room before conflict appears. They sense when a joke hides cruelty, when friendliness masks competition, when closeness comes with conditions. And over time, this awareness changes how you relate to people. Psychologists have found something fascinating here. People who end up with very few friends are often highly perceptive, not withdrawn from lack of interest, but selective from experience. They've learned that not all connection is safe, not all closeness is nourishing, not all social bonds are reciprocal. So instead of reaching automatically, they pause. But here's the reframe. It's not about being unfriendly, it's about being careful with your inner world. For many, this pattern begins after a kind of social exhaustion, not one dramatic betrayal, but a slow accumulation of disappointment. Conversations that felt shallow, friendships that required constant performance, relationships where you were useful, entertaining, supportive, but never truly seen. At some point, something shifts. You stop forcing yourself into rooms where you have to shrink to belong. Others misunderstand this moment. They think you gave up, that you isolated yourself, that you became closed off. But often it's the opposite. It's the first time you stopped abandoning yourself for the sake of connection. There's a psychological concept beneath this: emotional congruence, the need for alignment between your inner experience and your outer relationships. When friendships repeatedly ask you to betray your values, mute your depth, or simplify your truth, the mind adapts. It chooses solitude over dissonance. And because, let's be honest, much of modern friendship is structured around convenience and performance, shared spaces, shared habits, shared distractions. We bond over proximity, not intimacy. We talk but rarely reveal. We stay busy together but rarely slow down enough to be known. In that environment, someone who longs for meaning can feel perpetually out of place. Here's what's often misunderstood. People assume those with no friends must be lonely all the time, but loneliness isn't the same as solitude. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. Solitude is choosing space because connection without depth feels emptier than being alone. Think about it. When was the last time you felt more alone in a group than by yourself? When was the last conversation where you left feeling unseen, despite being surrounded by people? And what does that say about what we call friendship? But not everyone who has no friends arrives there from clarity. Some arrive from fear, from social anxiety, from rejection wounds that never healed, from being excluded, misunderstood, or emotionally neglected. For them, solitude isn't peace yet, it's protection. And both truths can exist at the same time. There's an existential layer here, because friendship isn't just about company, it's about identity. We learn who we are through reflection, through being mirrored, through being witnessed. So when someone lives without close friends, they're often forced to become their own witness, their own mirror, their own companion. That can be heavy, but it can also be formative. In a world that constantly says you are what others think of you, choosing to exist without social validation becomes a quiet act of resistance. You start listening inward, you build an internal compass, you develop an internal locus of control. Your sense of worth stops rising and falling with invitations, messages, or approval. And here's the paradox: the very people who seem disconnected are often deeply connected to ideas, to meaning, to inner life. They read, they think, they observe, they feel deeply, even if no one is watching. Their lives may look quiet from the outside, but internally there is movement. Over time, something changes. Colors feel richer, time feels slower, conversations feel heavier, more intentional. You stop speaking to fill silence and start valuing what silence reveals. You become less interested in being liked and more interested in being real. Science offers a gentle validation here. Studies show that people with fewer but more intentional relationships often experience greater emotional regulation and self-awareness. The brain adapts to solitude by strengthening reflective processing. You learn to sit with discomfort instead of outsourcing it. You process emotion internally instead of immediately dispersing it socially. But this path isn't without cost. Without friends, there's no easy place to unload, no casual witness to your life, no one to confirm that your experience makes sense. And on difficult days, the absence becomes louder, not because you're broken, but because humans are relational by nature. This is where people say they're independent. But what if independence was learned, not chosen? What if it was shaped by inconsistency, by being let down, by realizing early that relying on others came with risk? And yet, people who live this way often develop a rare kind of presence. They don't need constant affirmation. They don't perform closeness. When they do connect, it's slow, deliberate, earned. They're not interested in many friends. They're waiting for resonance. Maybe that's what real confidence looks like. Not being surrounded, but being centered. Not being visible everywhere, but being anchored somewhere inside yourself. There's something almost sacred about that. In a culture that monetizes attention and turns connection into currency, choosing fewer bonds becomes a way of protecting what matters. Some experiences are too fragile to expose. Some thoughts are too personal to share casually. Some parts of you deserve privacy. So when you notice someone who spends most of their time alone, maybe pause before assuming they're missing out. Ask what they might be protecting. Ask what kind of connection they're actually waiting for. If this feels familiar, you don't need to label yourself. You don't need to explain your solitude to anyone. You don't need to turn it into a personality or a problem. Awareness doesn't require justification. If this reflection resonated, you can leave a quiet comment below. Or don't. Maybe it's enough to simply feel recognized for a moment. Because having no friends doesn't always mean lacking connection. Sometimes it means refusing shallow versions of it. Sometimes it means choosing honesty over availability. Sometimes it means learning to sit with yourself until the world feels less loud. And maybe, just maybe, the people with no friends aren't empty at all. Maybe they're full.